Welcome everyone to the 20th of hopefully many Degenesis lore up videos. This video is about a cult. It is in fact the first video about one of the cults in the world of Degenesis, but this cult is pretty mysterious and very much involved in the meta plot and a lot of the stuff we looked at in previous videos. That's why the Anubians get their own video right here, right now. By the way, the channel hit the 500 subs mark, and I want to thank you for that. Thank you very, very much. Keep the subs, the comments, and the likes coming. I always like to hear when these videos are helpful for people and their play groups. Yeah, and now I hope you all enjoy this new video. The Anubians are one of the 13 cults in the world of Degenesis. As Africa flourished after the Eschaton, 3 cults established a power structure that guided the continent on its way to hegemony. The Neo-Libyans acted as the capitalist rulers, spinning a web of trade routes across the Mediterranean Sea, catching the people of Central Europe in economic dependency. The Scourgers, the claws of the African lion, protect the Neo-Libyans, catch slaves for them to sell, and beat down any opposition Africa may encounter. The Anubians are the soul of Africa, uniting the vast continent with their mystical ideology, offering spiritual guidance and medical support to the clanners of the continent. Anubian mythology circles around 2 energy forces called Ka and Ba. The Ka symbolizes the primordial form of the thread of life given to the cult members by Anubis and passed down the generations, persisting through the millennia. Some might call it a soul. Others say it is the genetic building blocks of their heritage. Its opposition is the Ba. It corrupts the Ka, invading like a virus, destroying and replacing it. It disturbs the wave and diminishes its power. Even though this mythology can be broken down to a banal dualism of life and death, the Anubians prove extremely knowledgeable in the field of medicine, raising the suspicion that their simplistic mythology is nothing but a front for an advanced scientific underbelly. The Anubis finger can be viewed as evidence for this claim. With the help of this tool, a hollow bone artfully adorned with circular and spiral engravings the length of a forearm, tapering to a fine point at the tip, the Anubians search for new initiates. According to legend, the bone is filled with jackal bile, and when an Anubian scratches someone's skin with the finger, a true descendant develops eczema, the size of a fingernail, from sunrise to sundown, the mark of Anubis. An Anubian embalmer then takes care of the initiate. Together, they travel to one of Africa's huge catacombs, and the initiate is lowered into it. Down there in the darkness, surrounded by his ancestors' bones, the initiate waits. They eat insects and corpse flesh that the embalmer throws into the shaft. They devour rotten mash mixed with drugs. Ghost-like, they stumble through the stony innards of the catacombs, stared at by skulls until their humanity is burned away and they confront Anubis himself. The visions are terrible, but they surrender themselves to them. Their cries fall silent. They sink down as they feel their wave break. 4 days after their symbolic and almost real death, the initiate emerges from the spirit world into the world of the living. The embalmer frees them from the bandages and greets the Anubian, still weak but reborn in Anubis. The embalmer then tattoos 7 concentric circles around the reborn's navel. He injects the paint under the skin, using a different pot of white paint for every circle. It is a concoction that only the Anubians from the forbidden city of Cairo can mix up. 7 shades of white, 7 different recipes. To the initiate, the circles symbolize the wave on which every living being drifts towards death, but also the world created by Anubis. The embalmer carries only 5 circles on his body. He explains that the circles show how far an Anubian has come on his journey into the secrets of the world, how close they are to their mind's son, Anubis. The initiate moves on the outmost circle, the enchanters on the 6th one, the embalmers, sickles, and healers on the 5th. The honorable Hogans have left the 4 outer circles behind and stand on the 3rd one. They decide when an Anubian is ready to leave his circle. The next step of Anubian initiation is found in exposure to the psychovores. The psychovores are strange and dangerous plants that sprouted from the Doruba crater and proliferated all over the continent after the Eschaton. The psychovores, or spirit eaters, as well as the duat fruits they produce, are feared by most Africans as harbingers of death and madness. Their thorns are hard as glass. One scratch is enough to make necrotic abscesses bloat the skin, eating away at the flesh within minutes until they reach the bone, infecting it, growing through it until it collapses and breaks under the weight of the decaying flesh. Within, they are compartmentalized in hundreds of chambers with crystalline walls. Every chamber is filled with epigenetically active substances. When they come in contact with human cells, they cause genetic aberrations, leading to a spontaneous dying of the cells, the so-called raise. The mutation jumps from cell to cell, spreading extremely fast. Yet the Anubians react differently to the deadly plants. Their blood binds the psychovore poisons, creating synergetic compounds. The Anubian body turns into a bioreactor, the complexity of which grows with every added substance. Thus, they venture deep into the psychovores to harvest the cherished duat fruit, smash them, and chew the pieces. The bioreactor kicks in, turning the Anubian's blood into a highly potent medicine. With time, Anubians learn the properties their blood has gained through the catalysis of various duat fruits. One night, the Hogans stand in front of the Anubian, arms and faces pitch black and smelling of resin. Silently, they hand him a canopic jar bearing the hat of the jackal for its lid. The jar is black, freezing cold, heavy and smooth as glass. The head can be screwed off. Inside, there is a viscous white liquid. As the Anubian lifts the canopic jar to his lips, ripples form in the liquid. It flows unnaturally towards his mouth. Small tendrils shoot out, piercing his lips, hardening and then breaking under the pressure of the flood that follows. The tongue is split open by an onslaught of roiling fluid. There is a crackling and cracking, and the canopic jar's contents surge faster than they could be poured into the Anubian's mouth. Death. Days later, the Anubian awakens. His tongue is swollen and dry, and the ribs are visible under his skin. His fingers touch the circles on his belly. There is something wrong. The outer ring is missing. It is just gone, as if it had never been tattooed at all. Every transformation deletes the outermost ring. The Hogons know what has happened, but they will not explain yet. With every transformation, with every circle that the Anubian masters, he loses some of the superstition, even though he still presents himself to the people as a spiritual healer, bargaining with Anubis for the life of the ill. After their transformation, from third to second circle, the Hogons are called to Cairo. The ancient city, holding the cult's deepest secrets, lies protected deep within the stranglehold of the psychovores. Anubians who have broken their ranks and hope to uncover the secret of Cairo have ventured into the psychovores, only to stumble back into the settlements from which they set out days later, their skin scratched by thorns, putrid pustules covering the whole body, weep stinking pus as the necrosis sets in. They are infected with the rays. It will kill them. Their supposed immunity will only make them suffer longer. The message is clearly visible to everyone. Cairo is taboo. According to the Anubian cult section of Primal Punk, the roots of the Anubian cult can be traced back to ancient Egypt and even further. The first Anubians were exiled by the pharaohs and fled to the kingdom of Kush. Fascinated by the Anubians' death cult, the Egyptians kept a lot of their culture. Ultimately, though, the cult vanished. Yet its mythology survived, and some of it is presented to us in the Anubian chapter of Primal Punk. It was night in the city of the dead. Soon the heat of the day would be gone from the sand. Wind arose, carrying the sand in fine screens over the graveyards. The figure with the jackal head strode through the necropolis vigilantly, its eyes glittering like stars in the darkest night. Anubis, with hands as nimble as spiders' legs, he wove a web in the air, anchoring it at crumbling obelisks and stairwells. gold-winged souls were caught in it, and Anubis reaped them. Then he sent them down to Osiris to be weighed and judged. Some souls escaped from his grasp. They were too foreign to him. Once he had blessed the humans with the Ka. For generations, mothers passed it on to their children. But like a corruption, the Ba entered the human soul and poisoned it. The Ka's power waned. In every cycle, the Ba roamed the earth, and things got worse and worse. Anubis lost soul after soul. Only one tribe's Ka remained strong. Anubis himself had imbued it with its thread of life when the world began. His children, the Anubians, the first people. Once Anubis had shown them the destiny of the world, and now he charged them with finishing what was eternal. However, like silver becomes matted and dark when exposed to the air, time had blemished the Anubians' purity. Only the ancient ones could destroy the source of the Ba. Buried in the desert sand long ago, they hoped for their awakening. Their descendants, the new Anubians, started searching. Let's take a look at this mythos at the core of Anubian ideology and see whether it might include more hints and explanations than what is obvious at first sight. The central figure of the narrative, Anubis, strides through a necropolis, a city of the dead. He then creates a web that catches souls for Anubis to reap. When thinking about this web and what it could be a metaphor for, what comes to mind is a force, or rather a dimension or plane of being that is mentioned quite often whenever the primer and homodegenesis are concerned. It is called ether. The ether is a non-physical network through which the psychonauts communicate. Burn users may enter the ether as the spores infect them. The Spitalians, as well as the Chroniclers, have developed technological devices with which they can receive the ether waves and use them in their fight against the primer. But for the Anubians, the ether seems to play a much larger role in their cult's ideology. The Anubians have a deep connection to the ether, and they use this connection regularly. Many Anubian potentials grant player characters powers due to their connection to the ether. And there is a paragraph in Moloch describing how Anubians all over Europe registered a burning sensation, some suddenly bleeding from their noses and vomiting incessantly due to the death of the Pharaohmancer King Marcuron that apparently tore a hole into the ether. We will look into the ether and the Anubians' connection to it in the heavy spoilers section some more. For now, let's go back to the Anubian mythos. The Ka and the Ba, the two mystical powers, are also mentioned. It is said that Anubis bestowed the Ka onto the people, but it was slowly corrupted by the Ba. Only one tribe's Ka remained strong. The Anubians, the first people. Once we connect this part of the mythos to some of the information gathered in previous videos, especially those covering the so-called pure strain, a special DNA sequence found in particular individuals in the world of degenesis, it becomes more and more obvious that the Ka and the Ba are more than metaphors for life and death. The thread of life mentioned in the mythos, the Ka, may very well be the pure strain DNA sequence that can be identified with the help of an Anubis finger. The Ba, on the other hand, can then be seen as anything corrupting the purity of this DNA sequence. The so-called Ancient Ones, also mentioned in the mythos, are named as the only ones able to destroy the source of the Ba. In the Anubian chapter, we find a more thorough description of these Ancient Ones. The Anubians are always looking for these ancient ancestors and are able to hear their whispers through the ether. They follow ancient drawings on brittle maps, listen to the whisper, letting themselves be guided by it. Usually, the wave breaks, and the Anubians have wandered thousands of kilometers into nothing. But sometimes, they find stairs leading down into prehistoric vaults, into labyrinths made of glass and polished sandstone. Behind false walls, protected by pitfalls and dead ends, the first people slumber, preserved in beautiful sarcophagi, eons old, made of gold, lapis lazuli, and chrome. No Anubian with more than 2 circles has ever seen one of these ancient ones. It is said that the sarcophagi are indestructible, and only an opening ritual in Cairo can unlock them. The long chain of the thread of life is said to be impeccable in them, inscribed into them by Anubis himself. No wrong letter, no errant passage disturbs the perfection. They are like him. In them, he will one day walk the earth. If one of these vaults is found, the Hogons will soon arrive. They take the sarcophagi from their bracings and carry them to a necropolis near to Cairo. They may not, cannot approach any further. The whispering of the ancients above the vault fades, only to be replaced by other waves shortly afterwards. Who these ancient ancestors are exactly is not clear, and I will save conjecture for the heavy spoiler part of this video. But still we can see that the mythos at the heart of the Anubian cult does carry a lot of meaning, and it might be able to explain a lot of the cult's actions at the current point of the metaplot. Before we explore these actions and other connections further in the heavy spoilers section, let's take a look at another organization somewhat related to the Anubian cult. The Anubis Syndicate, a mysterious group of 8 African scientists, doctors, and philosophers dedicated to the reawakening of the body after death. Reports about the group are superficial, and although the media greedily followed every hint, each and every one of them led to a dead end. About the Anubis Syndicate, not much more than its name was known. In the end, reporters found that Norman Thorne, one of the co-founders of the recombination group, had fled into the arms of this mysterious organization after an alleged case of industrial spying. Then, the Eschaton came. The fact that Norman Thorne, co-founder of the Recombination Group and the mastermind behind the hive epidemic, who disappeared in Cairo after becoming a whistleblower about Project Tannhäuser, joined the Anubis Syndicate shortly before the Eschaton, sheds new light on the cult and its history. It seems like Norman Thorne turned his back on the Recombination Group and its agenda, and joined the Anubis Syndicate to help them reach their goals by providing them with technology invented by the Recombination Group. In fact, there is one passage in the Anubian chapter of Primal Punk that supports this theory. It says, according to ancient Anubian records, their cult has been preparing for over 10 millennia to cement Anubis' creation within itself. Younger texts mention that it had almost managed to do so shortly before the Eschaton, thanks to bygone technology. This bygone technology is most probably the nanite, a nanotechnological agent invented by the Recombination Group that supported an individual's immune system, making them almost invulnerable and practically immortal. Some of the aforementioned rituals of the Anubian cult bear stark similarities to rituals we have seen before in other contexts in the world of Degenesis. A white liquid being drunk that causes some sort of death, followed by bodily transformations and an immediate rebirth of the drinker, can also be found in the sect of the Arianoi, a splinter faction of the Gehamidans. The white milk of the Arianoi and the liquid from the canopic jars that induces the bodily transformation leading to the disappearance of the tattooed circles are almost probably nanite liquids. In fact, the canopic jars are explicitly called nanite canopic jars in the paragraph on the Anubian icon Naku. It seems like Norman Thorne, his ideology, and the technological wonders he introduced to the Anubis Syndicate shaped the Anubian cult to a significant extent. The Solar Cross and the Jackal's prophecy also point to this fact. The Jackal's prophecy is an enigmatic text printed on the very first pages of the first Degenesis book, Primal Punk. This is not the point to look into the text itself, since it is too complex and definitely deserves its own video, but the Anubian chapter makes clear that the prophecy is viewed as an extremely important text by the upper echelons of the Anubian cult. The prophecy shows a strong focus on numerology and is based on the Solar Cross, a cross made of 4 fours that can be considered the true symbol of the Anubian cult. The Hogons say it includes the absolute truth about the past and future, being some sort of theory of everything. We know that the prophecy leaked out into the world from Cairo, which was the place where Norman Thorne disappeared before the Eschaton, and where he was most probably recruited by the Anubis Syndicate. The fact that Norman Thorne was granted the title the Jackal in the Agathopoeia picture begs the question if he was in fact the author of the prophecy. As shown in previous videos, Norman Thorne and the Anubian cult, as well as the Anubis Syndicate, are all connected to the entire complex of the pure strain DNA sequence and Homo geantis. We do know that the Spitalian Provost Kranzler suspects the Anubian cult to follow a hidden agenda threatening the existence of all mankind. According to Kranzler, the Anubians want to propel evolution forward, creating a new form of being, the so-called Homo geantis. Where the psychonauts, the Homo Degenesis, are defined by their respective singular chakra, Homo geantis would supposedly appear as a being defined by the perfect alignment of all chakras. The fact that the awakening of the 6th Earth chakra holds great significance for the Anubian cult is explained in the Black Atlantic Adventure, and it seems that the reason why it is so significant can be found in Homo geantis. In a message sent by Kranzler to the Corps Command of Helvetica, Kranzler claims that the hotbed of the dreaded transformation is Cairo, and that Norman Thorne was able to hide something there with the help of the Anubis Syndicate. For more information about Homo geantis and the entire subplot of Provost Kranzler, check out my video about the topic. Since this inquiry into the Anubian cult has led us into so many rabbit holes, I feel that a short summary is warranted before continuing. Even though the Anubian cult claims to be millennia old, a lot of its rites turn out to be way less ancient than claimed. Like the Arianoi, the Anubians use nanite milk for bodily transformations. Their cult seems to be very much focused on the pure strain DNA sequence, which most probably is codified as the force of Ka in their mythology, and they are able to detect it with the help of the Anubis finger. The upper echelons of the cult gather in Cairo, a city guarded by the thick psychovore belt. Inside the city, some sort of transformation seems to be occurring that could lead to the rise of a new form of being, Homo geantis. As far as the roots of the cult are concerned, Recombination Group co-founder Norman Thorne and the mysterious Anubis Syndicate seem to play a major role. But even if there is a technological underbelly to many of the Anubian rituals, there is one element of their cult that still seems very supernatural: their connection to the ether. In the second Justitian book, Moloch, we find a collection of paragraphs about Anubians in Borca that shed light on this very connection. In Borca, the cry of the ancestors is nothing but a distant whisper echoing across the desolate plains. Those who belong to the cult of the jackal are not drawn here by the call of the land, but instead by its slow decay. Borca is a black hole of waning energy, a collapsing star in which no chakra has ever awakened. The silence is deafening. Anubians sense the entropic nature of the countryside, feel the crippling winds blowing over the rotten soil, and are struck with impotence and fear. Something inside them screams for retreat, urging them to abandon their path and return home. For this place is obverse of the psychovores, a zone of negativity that disconnects the crown from its physical body. Borca, the only region without a crater, and therefore without an earth chakra, seems to be somewhat disconnected from the ether, resulting in unpleasant phenomena experienced by the Anubians. It is also described as the obverse of the psychovores, and in the Anubian chapter of Primal Punk, we find an explanation for this description. The psychovores are amplifiers, it says. They receive human aspects and emotions, channel and filter them through the network, and into that which Anubians and Spitalians call the ether. As mentioned in my video about the primer, the psychovores are related to the 7th chakra, or crown chakra, which is associated with higher levels of consciousness, spirituality, and enlightenment, and it does make a lot of sense that they amplify a connection to the ether network. But there is another curious piece of information that can be found in the paragraphs about the Anubians in Borca. The reason why many Anubians venture into this black hole of waning energy is that they follow the soundless hum of the pure strain, which has pulled them here in their dreams. The paragraph goes on claiming that one thing is certain. The city of Noret holds secrets that are directly related to the Anubian cult. The Jackal's followers are close, yet they, just like everyone else, are barred from the Forbidden City. This quote, in my opinion, begs two questions. What is the connection between the Anubians and the city of Noret, and what does the hum of the pure strain mean? We do know that the city of Noret was the place where the marauder Gusev rescued the frozen embryos of those who would grow up to become the Enemoy clan. For more infos about them, check out my video about Gusev. We also know that Noret is the place where the Recombination Group had one of its major pharmaceutical headquarters, and we know that the embryos Gusev rescued were pure strain isolates. It seems like the Recombination Group was aware of the pure strain DNA sequence and created thousands of embryos that carried it. It is possible that more of them still remain in one of Noret's facilities. Could it be the presence of the pure strain embryos that calls the Anubians to Borca? Could the pure strain be somehow connected to the ether network, guiding the jackal worshippers towards them, just like the whispers of the ancient ones guide them towards their sarcophagi? The hum of the pure strain might be an ether call the Anubians are able to receive. This is purely speculative, of course. While gathering information for this video, I did hit a lot of dead ends, pieces of information that might be connected to other elements of the metaplot for which I could not find any proof though. Instead of thinking up some wild theories, I've decided to just present them at this point and ask some questions that you, dear viewers, can think about. One of the things I forgot to mention while talking about the psychovores in my previous videos is the fact that they contributed severely to Africa's rise. The reason for that can be found in the language of Varui. Through the influence of the psychovores, the Varui language spread across the entire continent, uniting the various different people under the umbrella of a single language. Cultural differences began to shrink as this language spread during the decades after the Eschaton. The language of Varui is more instinctual. It has the ability to bind together the spirits of its speakers, leading to a more immediate and emotional understanding. Since the psychovores are connected to the crown chakra, the 7th and highest chakra that symbolizes spiritual enlightenment and a connection to higher states of consciousness, The plants blessing the African people with a universal language does make a lot of sense. But the connection to the psychovores seems even stronger within the Anubian cult, since we find many stories about high-ranking Anubians being able to command the plants, and most importantly, becoming immune to their corrupting influence. This might be connected to the pure strain DNA sequence, or the influence of nanites in their bloodstream. The nanites do have the power to fight the sepsis. The Varui language and the influence of the psychovores is incorporated into African mythology in the guise of the ancestors' influence. The people of Africa all know the 8 godlike figures, have felt their presence in their dreams, in the flow of feelings, and in the Varui language itself. Each of these 8 entities is associated with a certain range of emotion that may possess an individual from time to time. The first ancestor is often characterized as an eagle. He soars above everything, broadening his gaze to the horizon of his own being, but also taking in his surroundings. He strengthens intuition and gives hints of the future. The second ancestor embodies the strength and superiority of the lion. If this ancestor comes over a region, the people square their shoulders, compete with one another in duels, and take on any challenge. The third ancestor is like earth in one's hand, like a wall crumbling to dust because of a thought, like an earthquake. He manifests in the form of creative energy and of physical and mental exhaustion. Under his influence, great works of art and giant buildings are created. The fourth ancestor opens people's hearts. He is community and love. Joining on a spiritual level, he tears down barriers. The fifth ancestor is pure physical desire, colliding bodies that have only one goal: sexual reproduction. The sixth ancestor blows like a clear thought through the minds of the affected. The 1,000 layers of communication with their meta-meanings and lies crumble until only one layer remains. Every word is understood as intended. Every thought is a blazing star rising in the thinker's mind. The seventh ancestor only appears where at least 2 ancestors' influences collide. He superimposes them and unites their aspects. The Scourgers see him as the source of Varui. The 8th ancestor is the shadow cast by the other 7's light. He overwhelms and oppresses. His teeth and thorns catch every thought. People under his influence, who may have been open-minded and friendly a moment ago, suddenly act subversively, and only for their own gain. But the Africans accept it without complaint. Their world has always been full of good and evil spirits. Both are part of the order. These 8 entities and the emotional states they are associated with do show some similarities to the chakras and the emotions associated with them. There is the first ancestor associated with intuition, like the third eye chakra. The strength and confidence of the lion resonates with the chakra of the solar plexus. The creative energy the third ancestor gifts can be found in the root chakra, love and sexual desire of the fourth and fifth ancestors in the heart and sacral chakra. Wind and thought are associated with the throat chakra, and the seventh ancestor, who only appears in the convergence of two other ancestors and in the Varui language, does show similarities to the crown chakra. There is no eighth chakra though, yet if we were looking to a chakra-related equivalent of the erratic eighth ancestor, the discordance does come to mind. These similarities were too obvious not to include them, yet it is not clear what they might mean. If you have an idea, put it in the comments. On the other hand, the Anubis Syndicate, crucial in the creation of the Anubian cult, had 8 members who could have inscribed themselves into the collective unconscious of the African continent as the 8 ancestors, just like the many marauders of Central Europe have done. It is also possible that these 8 members of the syndicate managed to establish a connection to the ether network and are able to influence the people of Africa with the help of the psychovore amplifiers. This again is highly speculative, but if we assume that the Anubis Syndicate, maybe with the help of Norman Thorne, did somehow establish a connection to the ether network, we could potentially explain a very mysterious moment described in the Black Atlantic Adventure. There is the paragraph titled "The End of the Earth Age," where the player characters all share a vision of a crowned jackal in battle with a ram. This strange phenomenon is not further explained, and everything we know about the place where it occurred, the megalith field in Karnak, is that some people regularly had visions of a crowned jackal there. As mentioned in my Jahamet or Arius video, the connection between Norman Thorne and the prophet Jahamet is vaguely established by the fact that both of them vanished in Cairo, as well as by the strange visions of the character Zeno Blackheart. What role the ether plays in this relationship is, however, unknown. Another peculiar fact about the Anubian cult that lets their origins appear much less ancient than claimed is their obsession with the books of the dead. Anubians retrieve these books from the vaults of the first people. They are made of a deep, matty black material, and each one is massive and cannot be opened. They more closely resemble flat slabs than books. It is said that only Anubians with one or no circles know what to make of them. But it is also said that the books will only open and talk to the Anubians once Anubis walks among the living again. Whatever these books are, their descriptions show some resemblance to recombination group technology described in the Paler chapter, as well as the grindworks of Exalt, and proof again that the Anubian cult seems to know how to operate advanced technology. The same is true for the ancient machinery described in the short story Swan Song at the beginning of the Anubian chapter in Primal Punk. And the fact that chrome is explicitly mentioned as a component of the sarcophagi of the ancient Anubian ancestors also calls into question how ancient these sarcophagi can be, since the element of chromium was not discovered until the late 18th century. At the end of this already way too long video, let's look at two other pieces of information that might shed some light on the Anubians' mythology. In the second Justitian book, Moloch, we find only one Anubian amongst the various characters presented. His name is Atonke. The first paragraph of his character description offers us what reads like a prophecy. It says that a message lies buried, inscribed into the crust of the earth. It is a story written in compelling passages and great detail, and has been laying there, waiting for its discovery for 12,000 years, waiting for humanity to develop its senses, to receive and understand it. Blindly, mankind has been stepping across this ancient manuscript with no knowledge of its existence, with no means to unravel its hidden mysteries or comprehend its cosmic meaning. The universal civilization vanished without a trace. All that remains of it is a fading echo that transcends the tides of time. This passage does fit into the idea of the Anubians being some form of chosen people, the universal civilization blessed with the pure strain, following an ancient plan, an ancient prophecy to fulfill. Apart from this, we are introduced to the reason why Atonke traveled into Borca. His mission is to find and kill what is described as a being of pure Ba. Atonke is looking for the reincarnation of the Pharaohmancer King Marcuron, who is hiding inside the city, waiting for his minions to create a mother spore field to replenish him and usher in his transformation. The description of Marcuron as a being of pure Ba might be interesting. The force of corruption the Anubians call the Ba is found in the purest form of Homo Degenesis, a Pharaohmancer king. We have established that the mythological opposite of the Ba is the Ka, which might very well be the mystical name for the pure strain DNA sequence. This might mean that the Anubians have the fight against the primer written into their mythology, but it also sparks another question concerning the nature of the primer. Dr. Ernest Vasco, in the Spital's Assembly Hall in January 2562, claimed in front of selected doctors that the primer itself is pure DNA, a virus that made life on Earth possible billions of years ago. He also claimed that the war on the spore fields is the wrong course, and asked his colleagues to view the sepsis with an open and curious mind. It could be a new chance for humanity. If we view the metaplot of Degenesis, as already explained in my video about the primer, as the story of God, the Creator, returning to the garden only to find it corrupted by humans, I think we could ask the question if maybe the god Anubis is just a mythological cover for the primer itself. If what Vasco claimed was true, and the primer really is a pure form of DNA, it also might be connected to the pure strain as well. In this reading, the Homo Degenesis, the corrupted beings of Ba, could be corrupted in the sense that all of their chakras except the one related to their rapture are inactive, decayed, useless. The goal of the primer could be found in the creation of an uncorrupted, pure being born from the union of all 7 chakras aligned, which sounds a lot like Homo Gigantes. but this is just a theory. Let me just mention one more thing that I had to think about while researching the Anubian cult these past couple of weeks. The parallels between the Anubians and the Spitalians are pretty obvious and were mentioned in my last video. At first glance, the Spitalians look like a fascist cult of fanatical soldiers and doctors with questionable morals and fashion choices, while the Anubians, even though shrouded in mystery and mythological concepts, seem like their friendlier and definitely less fascist counterpart. The more layers you scratch off the surface, though, the more radical and maniacal the Anubian cult becomes. They seem to be following a maybe ancient prophecy based on genetic purity that could supposedly lead to the eradication of mankind once the next evolutionary step is taken. The Spitalians, on the other hand, however questionable some of their methods might be, do prioritize one thing above all else: the survival of mankind. Thank you for watching this video and making it to the end. It was very long and it took me a long time to make because a lot of stuff is happening in my life, like getting a new job, which I don't hate, and I actually have fun putting work into so that I don't have to compensate with hobbies so much. And there's a lot of more change coming to my life soon, so I cannot make any promises about future videos. Yet there are still a lot of topics I would like to look into, like the Jackal's Prophecy or whatever Agathopoeia is. Definitely some Clan War stuff and maybe even Orcan. Or some new IPs that are coming out from Six More Vodka. But I'll have to see. Anyways, thank you guys for the ride so far. You have been amazing. Please comment and like and subscribe and do all the stuff. And never forget to have a great one.